getting the business, getting it in. I don't care how it gets done. If it's just a small audit that's worth $100,000, this company is going to be able to generate several $100,000 for us, so it's a loss. But I don't want to get into the habit of having to do this every single year. So there's a lot of work that goes into reducing that confusion. Now, taking a step back, Gartner had a survey, and they surveyed a bunch of CIOs. And with the CIOs, they asked them, what are your strategies for 2010 and 2013? And there were two things that came out of that survey that seemed to match up with each other in those 2 different years. The CIOs want to link business and IT strategies and plans. And the other thing that they wanted to do is they want to deliver projects and enable business growth. Another part of that survey was, well, how do you see yourself getting there? What are the technology drivers to allow you to get there? And they ranked 3 things: cloud computing, Web 2.0, and virtualization. So even though there's a lot of discussions that security is the main driver for not moving into the cloud, there is a lot of push to move in that direction, especially at the CIO level. So now the question becomes, is the cloud ready for you? Oh, sorry, before I do that, let me go back here. Another survey out of this was sent out to 359 companies. 86%, well, the question was, are you ready for moving into the cloud, and do you have a process to evaluate third parties' security posture? And out of 359 companies, 86% claim that they have a process for evaluating it. 62% said, yes, we do, and the way we do is we send a questionnaire. That was it. Once we get the response back, we're comfortable with it. 54% said, yes, we do, but we also do an on-site review. So there's a lot of companies out there that rely on questionnaires, but then there's also that 14% that doesn't have anything at all. So when the question comes out, is the cloud ready for you? A lot of companies really don't take the next step, which is determining business needs and so forth. A lot of companies just either push to the cloud or don't move to the cloud, citing security issues. So determining the business need, I think, is one of the most important things. One of the most important steps to take. The other one is, will the cloud provider be around? There's a lot of cloud providers out there today, and I think a couple of them I've noticed already are no longer in business. The concern there is what happens to the data when they go away? Where is it going to reside? Who gets to own it? Will you be able to go after it? Another question that the cloud users should be asking themselves is, what data will be stored? Where will it be stored? And once you have that information, go into your business unit and say, here's the classification at our company that we've assigned to this data. Most companies that I talk to today don't have classification down to that point. So some companies usually have to go through that process and really saying, here's the classification I would assign to this data. Then take that and go to the provider and say, what type of controls do you put in place for the data if it were to reside in your site? If it matches, that's a good comfort feeling. I'd like to see better. So there are companies out there that actually does it a little bit better as far as controls are concerned. Another question is, who's responsible for security? If the service provider says us, that's the wrong answer. The responsibility is both sides. Now, the cloud user should have some visibility into implementing certain security controls, and part of that includes going on site and performing a review, or requiring certain controls to be put in place. Are there third-party validations that the service provider went through that can give you some level of comfort? And does that, there's different ways to gain comfort, whether it's a trusted third party or if they decided to hire their cousin to perform an audit against their environment, probably wouldn't be a good report. Will they allow for you to have a right to audit embedded in the agreement? Will they let you go out and audit? Are they going to limit on what you can audit against? The other question that you should ask for them is, do you have a process for removing data? What about incident response? Are you, as a cloud user, included as part of that incident response? And then finally, how often do you need to review that service provider based on all this information? Now, this isn't meant to be the all-inclusive list of things you should be asking for. There are organizations out there, like the Cloud Security Alliance, that's done a lot of great work in building a guide. And that guide will help a lot of cloud users and service providers to determine what type of controls we should consider. Another association that's out there is ANISA. Alex Stamos yesterday in his presentation mentioned ANISA. ENISA has a document that covers security benefits of the cloud as well as the risks. And they can make recommendations on risks and also how do you maximize the benefits of actually using a cloud. Another association that I like is the shared assessments, if some of you are familiar with that. They have a target data tracker. I'll cover that in another slide. They have a self-information gathering, which I just said, this is awesome, when I worked over at Yodlee. And the reason why it was awesome is because, not just because there's 2,000 questions that I had to fill out, but when a customer comes in, or a prospective customer says, Randy, we want to use your service, here's our questionnaire, can you go answer that? My response is, I have a SIG. Can you accept the SIG instead of me having to fill out the questionnaires? And for the most part, those customers recognize the SIG and allow for that to be accepted as part of that process. There's also another report that complements the SIG, and that's called the AUP. It's an agreed upon procedure. Shared Assessments came up with a list of controls that a third party, a trusted third party, would have to go in and audit against it. The report's given to the service provider. The service provider can choose to give it to the customer. So AUP complements the self-information gathering SIG. Other tools that are available on Shared Assessment, there's the business continuity questions. It's a list of questions that you don't have to come up with. You can just take that and send it out to the service provider and see if they can respond back to that. Privacy questions, where their data resides, or personally identifiable, and how it's protected. And they're coming up with some pretty awesome tools as well. Jericho Forum. Is anybody familiar with Jericho Forum? So Jericho Forum has been around for some time, and I think they were one of the first ones to talk about deperiodization of the network. But they also came up with a cloud cube model, which I thought was interesting. And it's a way to tell whether or not you're ready for the cloud on the private side or on the public side. So it's a pretty decent read. Another one that they came out with this year is the self-assessment document, and I'll touch on that in one slide. So if we take, for example, the target data tracker, I actually took a snapshot off of the target data tracker and send this over to your service provider that you're interested in leveraging their services. One of the questions that you should be asking yourself is, do I know this provider? By having them fill this out, it'll allow for you to have more visibility into their environment. You want to ask them what data resides in their environment. The cloud provider should know what data resides in there. If they don't know, it's a very good chance that they may not be the right solution for you. Now, I know that cloud, I remember going to Google and I said, Google, can you tell us what type of data is stored and where it's stored? And Google said, no, we can't tell you where it's stored. We can tell you where it's not stored, was the response. And another question that I asked is, well, can I see the SaaS 70 report? And their response is, we can give you a document that says we did the SaaS 70 report, but we will not give you the SaaS 70 report. So I'm not sure the practice or the approach that they took, and still don't understand the decision behind that. But from what I understand, that's the approach that Google takes. A lot of other service providers take a different approach, which is we need to be a lot more transparent about this. So let's provide that information out to them. So this document asks what data will be stored and verify this internally with your business team to confirm that it actually is the data that should be stored out there. You may end up finding out that none of the data or only parts of the data need to be stored online. Another question you should be asking is request for the locations. This is important. Sometimes the service provider would just respond back with their data centers, and they won't respond back with their corporate office that allows for some employees to connect into the production environment, or their operations team that might be that might reside in China or another country, or even the operations team that could be spread globally around the world. Get to know what data center or what facility actually touches your data and have them listed on this Excel spreadsheet. This will give you a better idea of what you're working with. And then also ask them to describe a very high level view of what type of controls that they set aside for that for those facilities. Now, how do you verify? Well, you can either leverage the SIG and have them fill that out. You can actually send that over to them and ask them to fill it out. It's 2,000 questions long. Or you can target your own questionnaire. And what I mean by targeting your questionnaire, make sure you identify that the questions you're asking are specific to internal or external controls. Earlier I mentioned that some of the security questions that I received in the past weren't clear on whether or not